Measure Q Priorities Town Hall meeting. At this time, can we ask everyone to stand for the pledge?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America,
and to the
and to the
republic
republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God,
God,
indivisible, with liberty and
liberty, and
justice.
justice for all.
Thank you very much. There we go. May we have roll call, please?
Mr. Buenaventura,
Present.
Dr. Rod,
Present.
Ms. DiGiovanni,
Present.
Mr. Sylvester,
Present.
Ms. Manalo.
Present. Thank you very much for that. And now we're moving on to our main agenda this evening. So just want to make this announcement pursuant to Governor Newsom's Executive Order N-29, 20 members of the Daly City Council and staff will participate in this meeting via teleconference. Members of the public are encouraged to watch the meeting via Zoom or also registration for public participation. So welcome everyone that is joining us. Our city council and city staff are committed to transparency when deciding how to spend new revenue from Measure Q, which is the Daly City Local Recovery and Relief Measure. Our voters passed this half-cent sales tax last November with overwhelming support. I want to thank all the residents that passed and voted for this much-needed funding and support from Measure Q. I also want to assure those residents that did not vote in favor of Measure Q that we still want your input on how to spend these new funds. We want to hear from everyone around your main priorities as we create the next budget that begins on July 1st. Last year in 2020, we rolled over the city budget without making changes due to the economic uncertainty presented by the pandemic and recession. This year, as in years in the past, we will hold public sessions to gather your feedback as we develop the budget for the next fiscal year. This budget process, which includes public input, has been our standard for a very long time. We have been, I wanted to let the public know, we have been listening already. Over the past 4 years, we started to conduct extensive community surveying specifically to ask you what city services and programs are a high priority. And we've heard from you. We know that emergency response services and being prepared for disasters is very important. Now even more through the pandemic. And we know that a majority of people in our community value fire response, paramedic staffing, and 911 emergency response. And today, that's why just very recently, your city council voted unanimously to restore Fire Engine 95 at the last council meeting. So after the city council in 2016 had to eliminate the fire engine They needed to do so in order to balance the budget. But now we are in a financial position to restore it. And thanks to the measure of Measure Q, Engine 95 will bring a new team of firefighting and medical staff to be there when you need it most. We know that there has been discussion among many community groups that want more consideration of Measure Q funds before restoring Engine 95. I want you to know that we acted with a sense of urgency to get Engine 95 restored in our new budget cycle. Just 3 months away, we needed to start recruiting staff right now to reinstate it on July 1st for the fiscal year. But there are many more initiatives to consider for Measure Q funds. And this evening, you'll hear about a variety of potential projects for your feedback. All of these initiatives are closely aligned with the priorities our community has told us that are important. For example, some social justice initiatives, such as expanding mental health commission pilot programs, restorative justice programs, and also bringing body-worn cameras for transparency has been brought to the table. We also need to plan for our recovery from the pandemic. It makes me so happy to see the rollout of multiple vaccines. And I know we feel a bit more relieved that the end of the pandemic is in sight. So let's work together to recover, to ensure all our community members get the support they need, and most of all, to make sure the types of city services that we fund are the services that you need and want to see in our community. So I want to thank each and every one of you that have made it today in this Zoom meeting or are watching live stream online. We are looking forward to hearing your comments tonight. And at this point, I will now pass it off to my colleagues for their introductory remarks. We'll pass it on to Vice Mayor Daly.
Yes, I just want to thank the staff, my colleagues, and all the community members that are on this call today. I'm looking forward to this robust conversation discussing our Measure Q funds. As you know, we are in a pandemic, and I'd like to see where we can actually put some of this the funding in these places that community members have highlighted for me. I had the opportunity to be on a call with the Daly Cities for Black Lives on Friday. I heard your responses and everything from, providing more services for youth to investing in behavioral emergency responses, investing COVID-19 health protections, finding ways where we can provide more, active services for youth leadership development for the seniors. So I'm really interested in seeing where everybody's at. I'd like to see the full range of people's interests. And I think this is where community is built. We all have different perspectives, and we all come and we all arrive to this conversation in different entry points. So I'm looking forward to learning, understanding, and most importantly, providing some action towards community needs. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Daly for your comments. Just to be clear to community members, we will not be making any decisions towards the budget this evening, but we are here to definitely listen to each and every one of you, your insight and your voice this evening. And this has come out actually from a response to community stating they'd like to see a public forum. And so I just want to acknowledge that. And at this point, are there any other of my colleagues that'd like to say remarks?
Yes, Mayor. Ma'am? I'll just keep it short.
Councilmember DiGiovanni.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam. I just want to welcome everybody to this town hall because this is your city hall, your city where you live, your community. Thanking the voters for Measure Q for over the 72%. And tonight we'll be able to hear more details for those that were not familiar with Measure Q or needed to know more information. And everybody's voice counts that's here, and those that could not be here tonight as well. Some didn't know in time to be able to watch on the television, which would be some of our seniors. But as we go along, hopefully we can hear more community input and let everybody know that I read all the letters. I welcome everybody's input. But our first obligation that we need to use these dollars for the half cent is for the Measure Q, for the 72% that did vote on this. And for whatever reason, the rest, that it will protect everyone. And I know that our firefighters, it was not something that is new. It was something that was shut down unjustly. I just want to make that pretty clear that on E95, if everybody looks at the history and really what happened, and probably some of you that were not aware of that, I want to make sure that's very clear. It's not anything new. It's not a new engine that we're creating. It's just something that was shut down, and it has water on it. So it's very important, and we need that for these calls, and as well as supporting all our public safety. And as we move forward, we can see and have discussions. And thank you very much for all of you being here. I'm looking forward to your input and to the staff and everyone and my colleagues. Thank you very much. Looking forward to this. Thank you, community. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember DiGiovanni. Anyone else from my colleagues that want to say a few words? If not, we will move on to the next agenda item. So at this point.
Yes, Madam Mayor. First, I want to thank you for agreeing to organize this meeting with everybody in the community. It was really what's been happening throughout the year, and with COVID, with the Black Lives Matter movement, the exposure of systemic racism, and all the things that have been an awakening really for our community and our country. This conversation is very much needed. And I am really just here to listen. I have my own ideas about what we should do, but my ideas are incomplete, and they need more robust discussions, as Dr. Rod had mentioned. And really the ideas don't just, they don't just come from the council. It really comes from the community. And so what I would urge the people on this call, and really even after this call, is to not be afraid and just say it. Just get it out there. Be bold. Express your thoughts, because we really do need your help in figuring this out in a way that is fair, equitable, and just for everyone in the community. Not just the one who speak out today, but we need to understand really what the issues are, and because we're going to have to ultimately make some tough decisions. And that's why we wanted to do public service. But that necessarily involves listening. And so that's my pledge to you, to everyone on this call, is to listen. I'm not really going to interject myself into debating different points, because I'm really here to absorb, to listen, and to understand. And then hopefully by the time we get around to the budget, we can come up with a plan, a solution that's fair and equitable to everybody. So thank you, Madam Mayor, for putting this on. Thank you for everyone for being on this call. I look forward to listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Buenaventura. And lastly, Councilmember Sylvester.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a great day today. Over the past 4 years here in Daly City, we as a council have strived for transparency. This includes budget transparency, and we've never had it before, and we've asked for it before. So I'm so happy that today has finally arrived. The community and the public, you deserve to know, and I hope that through this meeting of many to come, the why and the how our monies are being spent. This is very, very important because as the saying goes, as I've always said before, a confused mind will always say no. So now this is a chance to learn why we are spending the money. As the mayor has mentioned earlier, and I'm sure we'll go through it later, the basis of Measure Q was for emergency services and disaster recovery. We must continue to protect our critical infrastructure here in Daly City. And that's very important because that very foundation is what keeps Daly City on the map. And the things that we do, hopefully, will set an example that other cities are envious of, and that they will continue to watch over and see just what Daly City is doing. As always, public safety remains a high priority in our city. We don't, or at least I feel, we don't gamble with public service and the safety of our citizens. So with that being said, I'm looking forward to this discussion this evening. And Madam Mayor, thank you so much for moving this matter on in the area of transparency. This is, it's a dream come true. So thank you and welcome everyone.
Thank you, Councilmember Sylvester. So at this point, we'll move on to our agenda item, which is the recap of financial overview. I'll pass it on to staff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe we need to take a brief pause as our Assistant City Manager needs to restart his computer. We're having a problem with sharing screen. So if we get kicked off for some reason, Zoom's not cooperating right now, please just log in. We want you to participate.
Excuse me, City Manager. Some people are having trouble, Madam Mayor, getting in.
So that's what Stephen is working on right now. He's the one facilitating the Zoom. I appreciate it, Councilmember DiGiovanni. And for those of you trying to get on, please be patient. I think Stephen's trying to also work on that as well. We're having some technical difficulties today. I'm on my phone and computer. But I just want to say I see a lot of community members on here. We see over 34 people on the Zoom right now. I know there's many more folks that want to enter. I just want to say in advance, thank you for your participation this early evening. Here we go.
Okay, I think things are working now. Just give me a second to share screen. Everything froze, so just 1 second.
And welcome to those that have just joined us. We'll be moving into a presentation on the recap of our financial overview shortly. I mean, with vaccinations hitting people's arms, right? We hope that it's not the Zoom world that will be holding these types of forums in the future for each and every one of you, and that we're able to convene once again face to face.
Okay, can everyone see my screen? Okay.
Yes, we see it.
Okay.
Okay. Shall I take over for a minute? Okay, so obviously with Zoom as our current platform for conducting city business, it's not always perfect, but we've been able to conduct a lot of business through Zoom. What would we have done without Zoom? It's important to note, and I communicate this with my colleagues in other cities, that we're seeing a lot of different faces on Zoom. We're hearing a lot of different voices, which is wonderful. Daly City, like a lot of cities, struggle with community outreach. And so seeing these new faces and hearing these new voices has been a really tremendous experience. But I'm also going to take the opportunity to just do a kind of a brief overview about the budget, sort of the purpose of the budget of a local government for those people who may be in attendance who don't normally get involved at the city council meetings, at the council chambers and those kinds of things. So a local government's budget should be indicative of several things. It's community civic priorities, which we will be talking about this in detail throughout this town hall. But it should show how we're going to pay for those priorities, what revenue will pay for what departmental services, and for whom those services will exist. So it really should, the budget, reflect a strategic plan. And it really, in a perfect world, would consider the priorities of all stakeholders, from the government administrators, elected officials, employees, citizens, business leaders, everybody on this call. So staff really appreciates the opportunity to highlight the priorities that we believe are critical to our mission, including, especially in this vastly changing environment. And again, this is just staff's recommendation. It's a sneak preview of what staff will be talking about during the budget process, but staff is not seeking direction from council, nor will council be taking any action tonight. You'll see that there are some themes. There's recovery from the pandemic, developing the future of our organization, addressing issues of social inequity, and implementing efforts to bridge the digital divide are anticipated to be a large part of 2021. And so as I get into staff's thoughts about priorities, we'll cover those themes. So the first priority, and it typically is a priority for staff in all city government, that financial health and sustainability has to really come first and foremost. So recovering from the pandemic and sustaining our financial health is of top priority to staff. As mentioned earlier, the budget process should consider the needs of all stakeholders. And it's important to note that the financial sustainability of our city is also important, not only to our staff, but to our community. And later on in the presentation, Assistant City Manager Stephen Stolte will highlight the extensive polling that we did to determine community priorities. And that, in fact, did include financial sustainability. So that was on the minds of our majority of our community members. Last year, in the same theme of financial health, staff recommended and council approved the city's first policy related to our general fund reserves. So many of you may know what a policy is, or what reserves are. For a lack of a better term, it's really a rainy day fund that cities sets aside to plan for, effectively plan for cash funded needs, as well as unplanned needs, such as things like this pandemic, which we really did not see foresee a couple of years ago. So the reserve policy that the council adopted was really important, and it was critical because any consequence of outside agency actions that may result in revenue reductions, such as the pandemic, which we're seeing, natural disasters, liabilities, all of those kinds of things that the city doesn't necessarily anticipate in advance. It's incredibly important to have a reserves policy in those times so that we can continue as best as possible to continue to provide the services for as long as we can to our public during those critical times. In concert with the city's other financial policies, such as the reserve policy, the city is just a really important tool to guide resources. And so not everyone may know that in 2010, people are calling 2010-ish the Great Recession. Daly City was forced to balance its budget partly by delaying a lot of really important capital projects and deferring maintenance on our buildings and our vehicles. And due to the unique nature of Daly City, we aren't the same as other cities as far as our revenue sources. We did not recover from the recession as quickly as other cities did. And so each year that we put aside those capital improvement projects, it delayed them, delayed maintenance on our vehicles and our buildings. Those costs associated with those delayed projects increased. So not only were we behind in some of those projects, but now when we turn around and try to implement them, some of them are very critical, like ADA compliance issues and making things more accessible. The cost is much more expensive than it was 10 years ago, if that makes sense. And so the staff will be bringing forward policies throughout this budget process that address things like capital improvement and deferred maintenance and what we should be setting aside for those purposes. Another really important priority for staff is succession planning. Kind of a fun but scary fact in Daly City, very similar to other cities as well. We have a growing a population that's growing in age. Our workforce is aging. Nearly 25% of the city's workforce is eligible to retire. And then within 5 years, that number of employees that are eligible to retire will grow to 40%. That's a lot. So this will result most likely in a high turnover in really critical positions. A large portion of our workforce, you see faces that throughout the years that you've seen, at council meetings. It means that people don't typically leave Daly City. They like it here. The downside to that is when they leave, they have all of this stuff in their head. And then there's a huge gap when they leave. And so the city staff is really looking at how do we tap into those people before they leave, and how do we get our employees up to speed to take over those key positions. One of the things that is important to note that Daly City since 2011 has eliminated 30 positions. So 30 positions have been cut from our budget. So we were already a city that had a lower employees per resident, but now we're one of the lowest in San Mateo County. So per each 1,000 residents, there are 3 city employees. A major change in service delivery took place when the city, back as a result of the Great Recession, combined the library and recreation department, because the programming associated with the library and the recreation departments were at that time determined to be a burden on our general fund. And this really did lead to a reduction in community programming, especially for our youth and senior population. So staff is now exploring, or would like to be exploring, the potential to restore and expand programming in these areas, including broadening our community outreach efforts to ensure inclusive engagement. So this would include addressing what you probably all hear now and are familiar with, the digital divide, which is very real in our city. With Zoom as this new platform, it would appear that we aren't reaching effectively all of our residents. in this kind of virtual space. And conversely, not everybody's voices are heard, and they could be possibly stifled due to the lack of resources or technical skills that would allow them to join community conversations. And so this is prevalent among our senior population right now. We talk about it regularly in our age-friendly task force meetings that, how do we address the digital divide? So that is another component priority that staff will be looking at through this budget process. And then lastly, to address really a theme that's happening in almost all cities, counties, states in our nation, and that's related to effective and transparent community policing. Our own Daly City Police Department is one of only 4 cities in the county that will be participating in a community wellness and crisis response team. It is our sincere hope that this pilot is successful and that it would be one of many policing collaboration efforts to address social inequity. Along those lines, staff through this budget process will also be recommending the purchase of body-worn cameras for our police officers. There may be some thoughts against that body-worn cameras. In theory, I believe we did get some public comment on that. However, it's important to note that it really has become part of modern-day policing. I believe we are, one of one or two cities in the county who don't currently employ body-worn cameras. So the benefits from the staff's perspective, from our police chief and command staff and our officers' perspective, is that body-worn cameras would increase accountability and transparency. There is a faster resolution of personnel complaints, ideally better behavior by officers, safer driving habits, and better evidence for criminal investigation. So those are some of the priorities that staff has in mind. The great news about that is that they largely mirror, as you'll see, what the community had voiced was a priority for them, as well as council. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to just sort of the efforts that we've made. Briefly, a presentation by the assistant to the city manager, Leilani Ramos, on COVID and the impacts to public services and how we've really been resilient through that.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, members of the public. Tomorrow marks 1 year from the date the county issued a shelter-in-place order requiring the city to suspend most in-person services and implement measures to ensure the safety of the public and city employees. The need to stay physically distant allowed all 11 departments to reimagine city operations overnight and reinvent the delivery of public services through modified procedures, online options, and virtual platforms. As a direct result of the pandemic, services that needed to be obtained in person now require an appointment and self-screening for symptoms. Queuing mats, glass barriers, and hand sanitizer stations have also been installed. To preserve critical public processes, City Council and Commission meetings switched to an online meeting platform. A newly revamped website was launched to provide user-friendly access to pertinent information, such as COVID-19 updates, and a new business resources page focused on small business recovery. Housing and rental assistance applications have been made available online due to increased demand within our community. Residential and commercial projects can be reviewed remotely, and permits can be issued online. Additional online services include utility bill payments and parking permit renewals. On-site, employee exam proctoring has been modified to safeguard job applicants and staff, and interviews are conducted virtually. 24-hour operations were modified to maintain uninterrupted services to the community. Staff takes all necessary precautionary measures when interacting with the public. The Senior Congregate Nutrition Lunch Program transitioned to a grab-and-go and delivery model to ensure our isolated seniors continue to receive nutritious meals. The pandemic brought to life the Virtual Recreation Center and a multitude of incredible video productions such as Sliced. Citywide cultural and holiday events are hosted virtually. Library services have pivoted to mail service, curbside pickups, and virtual programming, with an emphasis to provide support to address the digital divide by offering more mobile hotspots and Chromebooks to community members. Legal matters continue to experience delays since the courts are granting extensions and limiting hearings to only urgent matters. The U.S. Department of State has not authorized the city to resume issuing passports, but staff can answer passport questions over the phone and provide hard copy forms by mail. While COVID-19 may have reshaped how the city conducts business, city staff remain available to serve the public. I will now turn it over to Assistant City Manager Stephen Stolte to review the community identified spending priorities and Measure Q.
Okay, thank you, Leilani. So let's start with the actual ballot question that voters considered in November 2020, and I'm going to read it out loud. Measure Q is the Daly City Local Recovery and Relief Measure, and the ballot question is to provide emergency funding that cannot be taken by the state, maintaining the city's long-term financial stability, city services, such as supporting local businesses, preventing and addressing homelessness, maintaining paramedic, fire, and 911 emergency response, senior services, preparing for natural disaster and public health emergencies, shall the measure establishing a half-cent sales tax providing approximately $6 million until ended by voters and requiring independent audits and public oversight be adopted. So we arrived at that ballot question through community surveying. And through this survey effort, we are able to gauge community interest in certain city services and programs. And we are also better able to prioritize services for funding because we actually ask survey respondents to effectively rank different services in terms of priority. So the surveys are prioritization exercises. And the latest round of surveys was conducted in 2020. We received feedback from over 600 people in a survey conducted by a professional research firm. And we also heard from over 600 people in another survey we launched called the Daly City Discussion, where we asked respondents to further rank different city services. These surveys are statistically valid, and that just means we talk to enough people across Daly City to be able to rely on the survey results to gauge what our community values. And if we look at the results from the November 2020 election, we see that our survey results kind of match the vote count for Measure Q. In our surveys, 75% of people said that they would vote in favor of a half-cent sales tax. And the election results show that over 72% of our voters approved Measure Q. Those numbers are statistically the same. Our community priority survey results are reliable over a range of plus or minus 4%. So let's get into the results on spending priorities. And there's a lot. So over the next few slides, I'm going to take you through the top 23 spending priorities that we heard were extremely important or very important to our community. And you'll see that many services can be grouped together in categories or themes. You'll see many related to emergency response services. You'll see financial sustainability, and you'll see services for vulnerable community members, like older adults and youth, and then also support for businesses. Those themes are really going to emerge from the data. And these themes tend to be consistently important to Daly City residents year after year. So let's start with the top of the list here. And first, I want to point out on the right-hand side, you'll see percentages. These are the percentages of survey respondents that rated these services as extremely important or very important. And you'll see that these services are at the very top of the list and most important in terms of priority. All are in the upper 80th percentile in terms of importance. So let's read through the list here. Emergency life-saving equipment and apparatus, local fire protection, local paramedic services, maintaining the city's long-term financial stability, local paramedic staffing and capacity, 911 emergency response, and the city's long-term financial stability and self-reliance during uncertain times. You can see that two main themes emerge here at the very top of people's minds, and it's emergency response services and financial sustainability. Now, we're going to keep going down through the list, okay? And here you'll see that everything on this slide is very important as well. All of these categories are over 80%, so they're still very top of the list. And there are things like keeping streets and public areas safe and clean, natural disaster and emergency response, also preparing for future disasters, maintaining services for our most vulnerable communities. There's quality of life services for residents, rapid response to burglaries, street infrastructure, retaining local businesses, and youth and after school services. New themes emerge here, especially around disaster response and also disaster preparedness, and then maintaining the infrastructure like our streets and our public areas that we all use frequently in our city and that relate to quality of life. what we experience on the ground in Daly City. And then finally, services for youth and older adults as more vulnerable community members. Okay, here we continue to move down that list, and we'll see new themes emerging yet again. And you'll see, look at those percentages. These priorities are extremely or very important to well over 70% of respondents, meaning that they are still broadly supported by the community. And here you'll see that a new theme emerges in support for local businesses that have been negatively impacted by the recession and pandemic, and then also helping our local businesses recover. Our local recovery is clearly top of mind for most people in Daly City. I think our community knows that businesses are really suffering tremendously right now. And here we are examining services that are still very important. I mean, it's upper 60s to all the way to upper 70s in the percentile of people that rate these services as important, but they are relatively less urgent in comparison to the other things we just discussed. And new themes emerge here as well. Library and recreation programs, maintaining our parks, homelessness, and local police services. Knowing these types of everything we just talked about, high priority spending categories, they help the city build a budget around services that are most important to the community. And as you've seen, there's clear themes that emerge from the data. We also launched the Daly City discussion. This city staff sponsored this survey, and over 600 people responded to this one as well. Here is an example of a mailer with a tearaway card where we asked respondents to rate or rank 7 different categories in terms of importance, and you could also respond online. And I have to tell you, about a quarter of everyone that responded found the prioritization difficult to complete. For example, we received many responses with everything ranked as number 1. And it's because prioritizing services is very difficult for residents, for city staff, for elected officials. Most people think that all services are important when it comes down to it. And if you have the option, you'd say yes to everything. But we live in a resource-constrained world, and we can't fund every single thing. So prioritization helps match our limited dollars to the most important priorities. So let's move into the results. Here you will see the results of the Daly City discussion. And you can see these themes were present in those community surveys we did with the outside research firm. So I will read these. These are the categories that received the number of votes ranked as number 1. And first on the list is maintaining the long-term financial stability for the city, its residents, and local businesses. Number 2 is maintaining local police protection. Number 3 is preparing for any future medical or catastrophic emergency. And number 4 is maintaining services that support youth and local students under any future circumstances. These first 4, you'll see that they're pretty close in terms of vote counts. If you go down the bars here with the numbers, there's only a 39-point spread from number 1 to number 4 in terms of vote count. So they're all closely related. Then we move on to the number 5 rank is restoring and improving local fire protection and emergency medical response. Number 6 is keeping street infrastructure properly maintained for first responders and local drivers. And finally, number 7, maintaining local paramedic staffing and capacity. Okay, so those are the community survey results from 2020. Now we're going to move into city council identified budget priorities. And these priorities are identified or explained more, kind of discussed more at our annual city council retreat. And we, at this retreat every year, we review community survey findings, and then we plan mostly for the next year, which aligns with our budget timeline. And we also conduct a prioritization exercise with the city council as well. We ask them to vote on the list of priorities. So we'll review those results next. The city council priorities are identified through interviews and discussion. And then the city council engages in that voting to determine what areas should be highest priority for city staff to focus on over the next year and beyond. And we had our last retreat on February 27th, and you'll see the results right here on this slide. All of these categories, these themes and topics were identified by interviews and discussion, and then we did the voting, And that's basically represented by the bars. And first on the list is Engine 95. And you already know that the City Council voted unanimously to restore Engine 95 at the last City Council meeting. Number 2 on the list is COVID recovery and continuing our investment in the areas where there is the most need among our residents and local businesses. And then next, I'm going to talk about 5 areas that largely relate to social justice issues and restoration of city services. And you'll see there's 2 ties here on the list. Third and fourth are tied for number 3, is to modernize police equipment. And what we really discussed was body-worn cameras here. And tied with research and pilot a restorative justice program. Then we move down the list. Tied at, this is really 4th place, but number 5 and 6 are tied. The prevention and intervention programs, like the Community Wellness and Crisis Response Team. This is that mental health clinician pilot program that we are partnered with other agencies on to embed a clinician in our police department to respond to emergency calls. And then also planning for the restoration of library and recreation, which suffered pretty big cuts due to the Great Recession. And then 7th on the list here, really, it's ranked number 5 due to the ties, is implicit bias training. And city staff is already working on a lot of these things, and implicit bias training will be rolled out to all city staff very soon in the future. And then here's some other things that came up in interviews and discussion with the City Council: access to public information and engagement, continuing our effort for more affordable housing citywide, showcasing Daly City. And that really means that we are getting all that good news about the projects we're working on out to the community and hopefully getting it picked up in the media. Addressing deferred maintenance. You heard our city manager talk about this. This is all of the maintenance backlog on our buildings and facilities and vehicles. And then finally, evaluating bringing back 911 dispatch to the city. It was previously outsourced to the County of San Mateo. Okay. Now, I said we do this annual retreat every year, so we can actually review the results of the City Council budget priorities from 2020 to 2021. In January 2020, we had a City Council retreat. This is right before the pandemic kicked off. And you can see the results here. Top of mind on all of our City Council, for all of our City Councils, reinstate Engine 95. So that held true year to year. Addressing housing and homelessness was also top of mind in 2020. And that still came up in our discussions this year about, more so about continuing work on affordable housing. And you saw restore police services, complete the Cal Palace master plan. That didn't come up this past year, largely because we're doing a lot of work on that already, especially on the city-owned parcel to build affordable housing in the Bayshore community. Explore revenue options was top of mind, and we were, thank you to the voters, we were successful in adopting Measure Q, our half-cent sales tax. And then finally, showcasing Daly City. So you can see that there is some crossover, and some things fell off the list because they were largely accomplished. Okay. Now we're going to move into current and potential projects that Measure Q could be used to fund pending further consideration by the City Council and the public. One thing that you'll notice that is not on this next slide is ensuring our financial sustainability. Measure Q could be used to ensure that our budget stays balanced and that our reserves are maintained at that City Council approved target, so we have money to draw on in the case of emergency. So let's review this list of potential projects. Again, these projects are informed by community survey data, as well as the City Council identified budget priorities from our annual retreat. And first on the list here, also ranked number 1 at the council retreat, was the restoration of Engine 95. This relates to emergency response services that came up again and again in our community surveys. Close to $2.9 million will now be added to the next fiscal year budget to bring back this fire engine company and the associated staffing. So that all starts July 1st. Next, we have a group of potential projects that fall under the social justice issues category. And the first project we have listed here is that Community Wellness and Crisis Response Team. And that's the mental health clinician program. And we're all working for this 2-year pilot program to be a big success. So the city council could consider expanding the number of mental health clinicians in our police department after the conclusion of this pilot period. And we have an estimate here for 3 clinicians, and that would be about $500,000 every year in our budget. This was the 4th most important priority for our city council at their retreat. Next, we have body-worn cameras for police officers. There is an estimated cost of $560,000 every year, and this was ranked, and it was a tie, number 3 in terms of priority at the city council retreat. And then finally, we have a restorative justice program pilot here at the local level. And this was also tied at the number 3 spot at the retreat. And we're estimating anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million annually in costs, but staff are at the very, very initial stages of research into what this program would entail. So it is a wide-ranging estimate there. And then finally, we have a group of initiatives focused on vulnerable community members, like older adults and youth. And one area that also aligns with community and city council priorities is strategically offering services through our library and recreation divisions. A lot of their current programs already focus on youth and older adults, but some of those programs, especially for older adults, have been cut over the years since the Great Recession. And we added a new, and before I move on, the digital divide issue is large here. And it's not just about internet access, it's also about digital literacy and being able to use online tools to consume information and understand it. So that's really top of mind for us with some of our active adult programming. And then there's a new category added here for mental health services. And we're estimating that a strategic mix of programs here through library and recreation would be about $1.5 million annually to account for staffing and program costs. And this ranked number 5 at the City Council retreat. So you can see that if we add up these estimates, the remaining Measure Q funds, in a hypothetical situation where all of these programs are adopted by the City Council, the leftover Measure Q funds annually range from $470,000 to $970,000. And those figures will get more exact as we get more research completed on some of these potential initiatives. Okay, so I'd like to pause here before we get to community input and pass it back to the mayor and city council in case you have any comments or questions. And then, Mayor, if you'd like to open it up for public comment after that.
Thank you very much to the staff for presenting our financial outlook, some of the surveying the city has done over the course of time, and also the results in regards to Measure Q and some of the staff priorities, and also the results from our council retreat and just recently that happened a couple of weeks ago or so in regards to where the priorities are for council. And also just some of the information that maybe our community members don't know. And so I appreciate the kind of comprehensive look at sharing the information to our community. And I know many of you are waiting to speak, and at this point, prior to us moving on to city council responses in regards to the staff presentation, I know that we are not making any decisions this evening, but we're here to listen and make decisions, final decisions further down the year. But I think one thing for certain, and staff put out kind of where dollars could be allocated. These are some recommendations, but we're here today to also hear the feedback from our community members. I think some of the programmatic aspects that were mentioned from staff and I just want to just state this in regards to the mental health program that was stated around maybe evolving it and growing it into 3 personnel. I think that's great that staff has that as a recommendation. But I do think that if it does go well, and I know that it's been mentioned before that if possible, it can move into a direction where it's only the mental health clinician and not DCPD that is that actually comes out to that mental health call. But and maybe that is something down the pipeline after the pilot. The pilot has done kind of analysis in that regard. But one thing I think is important, and as far as kind of the trauma that has happened in the past in regards to incidents that may have occurred within the BIPOC community, is maybe after the pilot program, maybe there's an opportunity for it to be housed with a different department, such as the fire department, in that regard. But that's just something down the pipeline. I know that there's been a lot of trauma within the BIPOC community, and so that's just something that right offhand with the staff's presentation, I'd like to note. And so offering the opportunity to my colleagues at this moment for any comments back from staff's presentation.
I'd like to start off with a comment, if I may.
Councilmember Sylvester.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Stephen and Shauna, thank you, and Leilani for your presentation. I think the public needs to know that what we voted for at the retreat was a short-term items. In other words, what we would like to see done within a year or a year and a half. Please clarify with the public that we should also be concerned with long-term, looking out 5 years ahead of time. And as the city manager had made mention, there's issues such as deferred maintenance and capital improvements to which we need to consider as well. So that's number one. My thoughts on the clinicians and adding the clinicians was an excellent idea. I think that we need to collect data through this pilot program to come out and say just the clinicians will respond. If I were to take the place of a clinician prior to going to any scene that to which a call comes in, I want to make sure that I am safe. And some of the questions that are asked on some of these calls are there any weapons in the home? Is the person acting violent? And I think those are things that need to ensure the safety of clinicians. So I think this is going to be a work in progress, but it's an excellent idea in looking forward, because Daly City is so large, and I feel that one clinician will not do it. So kudos to staff for considering increasing the amount. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember DG.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the staff for the details and for the public to get a little snapshot. And with Councilmember Sylvester, I agree to clarify that in the end, when we're clarifying our top 3, as far as short term to the public, I concur with what the Councilmember Sylvester said, that we were not looking at for the data, because this is the first time that restorative justice had been brought up at this last goal setting or priorities. And that's the first time that we didn't even really get a chance to discuss or whatever, but at that time, but it also was not top 3. It went to number 4, not saying it's not a priority or we haven't even discussed it, but that negated for myself the rest of the list that you saw of where to even rank that, because we didn't look at the long term at that time. And that in itself, that one will probably be long term, even though we haven't gone into it yet. So I just want to make sure that it's clear to the public as well. And the clinicians expansion, I know that that it will probably be because our population, I thought that was a good foresight as well. I echo that, and to try to look into the issue of the body cameras that brought up by all of us was great, because at the last meeting, the forfeitures were used for the GPS, the forfeitures from the Daly City funds, police funds, not from our budget. Just to clarify for those, I believe it was in one of the letters that I received, and I want to make sure there was a clarification that we did not touch any budget or expand any budget, that the PD did use their own forfeiture funds for that GPS. So I just want to make sure that everything is clarified. And tonight, I hope that the public community feels that I know you have questions and comments, looking forward to them. And even after this, I'm sure that staff or any of us would be welcome your questions and answers and comments as well, and take into consideration your thoughts on any of this. But I just want to make sure that was clear, and I thank you, Madam Mayor, for the time.
Thank you, Councilmember Di Giovanni.
Mayor, I'd like to contribute to the discussion as well. I just want to say thank you. Oh, sorry. I just want to say thank you to the staff for putting that all together. That's a lot of hard work. And I really appreciate the clarity, the transparency, and the process to provide a context to understand why Measure Q came about. And to also kind of understand what's on the docket, what are we facing? What are the issues? What are the problems that the council and the staff are facing in terms of restoring services to the city, and most importantly, providing opportunities. So I really love that chart that you put together, Stephen. I don't know if you, Stephen, or somebody on the staff that put that the priority list for 2020 versus priority list for 2021, and it shows we're being responsive to the current situations that are happening right now. So thank you for that. But I have a couple of issues that I want to bring up. I know in public comment, there have been a lot of discussions about the question of body cams and body cameras for police and how effective are they. I think some of the public comment spoke about, will they be used for prosecution for cops that do use excessive force? There's been conversations that body cameras have been used more as a form of surveillance to prosecute situations. And so I kind of want to see more information about that, because I know that body cameras and the sustainability for it and the use and upkeep for it is very expensive. And I would like to be well informed before we make a decision and invest money in improving the communications and resources for our law enforcement. I also am appreciative of how we're utilizing creative solutions. So bring forth restorative justice, bringing forth prevention and intervention, wellness and crisis responses. And just like with my colleague, Glenn Sylvester, these are new things. And I think the more and more data we gather to see how this works, then we could refine and retool and hopefully perfect this form of services for mental health situations. And so I'm really glad that we have that on our priority list. And one more thing is I think that one thing that I've been learning through this process is, coming onto council, understanding the budget process. And I'd like to see in the future, like maybe having public input and public presence at our budget retreats, just to see where we can have this type of forum. But before we even create the budget priorities, that would be something that I'd like to entertain in the future. But thank you to the staff for putting this all together.
Madam Mayor, go ahead. Pardon me, Dr. Rod. Madam Mayor, I just have one more thing on my list.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, for your comments. And now, Councilmember DiGiovanni.
Thank you, and thank you, my colleagues. I just wanted to make sure, I wonder if, I know that the largest percentage of funds created from people outside our community, as we had discussed in a prior meeting. So would it be possible, I know that cases where...
You're going in and out, Councilmember DiGiovanni. You are going in and out.
Oh, I apologize. Must be technical. I'm in City Hall. So what I was going to say is, I think we had discussed at one time that the data showed that most of the crimes committed were people that were not from Daly City, and that could we have data also that I believe our Madam Mayor says something about people being traumatized or what have you, what instances have traumatized the people from our Daly City PD. I just don't want to mix something that's happened in other areas and bring it into our Daly City to where usually we have a great diversity, and I'm not saying 100%, but I'm just saying that I just want to make sure that we don't cross over and make sure it's clear, it's our Daly City, not compared to other cities. That's all. So thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor DiGiovanni. I think what we have here is a menu of options for us, and as mentioned by our colleagues, these can be refined. These are potentially what the Measure Q dollars can go for, but it is also a response to what we've heard, right? And I think that's something that we want to state very clearly to community members here, that, it's a response also to what we've heard. And also it's a continuation to also hear from others around what they want to see and what in our Daly City programming, and from the Daly City community. And this is an ongoing, ongoing process. And so I now, at this point, I'm looking forward to hear from the members that have been waiting very patiently. I hope all of you understand that there was really a comprehensive presentation for all of you from staff to give more insight on the what has transpired with our budget. And so at this point, I will open up public comments, but I do want to say that even if we move towards, we have this until slated till 7, but if not everyone is able to speak, then I will continue with past 7 p.m. In honor of those who want to speak in the public. Okay, so at this point, I will hand it over to staff for our public input. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Let me just share my screen first, and it has instructions. So hold on one second. Okay, if you would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature, and I will call your name when it is your turn. You do need to unmute yourself before you start speaking and state your full name for the record. You will have 2 minutes, and there is a timer that will show on screen, so you can judge how much time you have left. If you are one of the people calling in by phone, I know we have a few, to raise your hand, you need to press *9. And to unmute yourself, it's *6. Okay, so I'm just going to go down the list as I see hands raised here. We have 4 people with their hands raised. We're going to start with Wallace Moore. So if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you very much. Good evening, council members. I want to thank you very much for having this meeting. I basically want to just talk on behalf of the Engine 95, which of course is as being one of your top priorities as far as the budget, and survey reflected that as well. Living in the community myself, as a resident, I've been wondering when we're going to have this engine back, but I'm very, very happy that it's going to happen. I campaign on behalf of these people, in other words, the firefighters. I talk to people about them. I say, well, living in the community, most of the homes here are very expensive. And when we have fires and stuff like that, we don't want it to be reduced to ashes, and we don't have any engine to respond at the right time. And not only that, going to meetings at the district school meetings, I see that of course, the school is just right across the street, but we know about emergencies, what happens. And if we don't have immediate response, devastation can happen. So I'm actually just very happy about it. So I want to say I support it, and please let's get it going again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. The next person will be Teresa Fapua.
Hey, good evening, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council, and the beautiful Daly City, the public, the community. I first want to say thank you, Shauna and Stephen and Leilani, for such a well-prepared presentation. I am a visual learner, and I do understand, and I took notes. So thank you for that beautiful presentation. I too support the having emergency preparedness. Like I love how you guys break it down. What's the top priority? And not all those components are important to us, the community of Daly City. Not one is perfect, not one is main, but they're all important to us. So bringing back the Engine 95, I fully support it. And with the rest of, I love that you guys consider the restorative justice, which is Bayshore School District is already implementing that in our disciplinarian, in our program, and in our school. I do support the libraries, and I'm glad that that is bringing back to, coming from the libraries and recreation. So thank you again for bringing those up, and looking forward to Wild Blend and bringing back Daly City. And it's good to see that. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay. Okay, the next person is Nadia Bick. If you would like to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, council and staff. Thank you for hosting this. Like council member Dr. Rod had said, it would be awesome in the future if we could have a public forum prior to the council having their own forum, so that we could actually give input before decisions are being made. I think that's more transparent for sure. That being said, I'm looking at what was mentioned in terms of community wellness. The CRT program most definitely needs to have more than one person for the largest city in the county. We think that for it to be successful, we definitely need to have at least 3 clinicians, and it would be wonderful to house them in the fire department rather than the police department. Because the paramedics are in fact also trained to deal with emergency responses and mental health crises. In terms of body cameras, I'm sorry, but I would definitely disagree with our money going to increase the police budget that is already the largest budget in the city. As of right now, I think that the body cameras are a bad idea in that the police have been known to turn them off and keep them off and not utilize them, and the cost is too high for what is needed. I think we need to look more into the restorative justice program, increasing that budget. Also looking at having to actually have explicit bias training for all officers. An incident that occurred in July in the summer, there was a young man that was actually brutally beaten by the police department here in Daly City. There's actually a lawsuit happening right now because the family tried to file a complaint with the police, but they would not hear it and they would not file it. And so we need to make sure that there actually is oversight when it comes to the police. And I really think that we need to look into having a police commission, some sort of oversight for the public to be able to look into these issues that are occurring, because the police should not be doing the oversight of themselves. The police should not be policing themselves. We think that, they serve us, and we should be overseeing what is happening and looking into any injustices that are occurring. And finally, thank you for restoring all of the money, part of the money that needs to go back to the library and recreation and adult activity. I would say, having the Bayshore Library only open 2 days a week is a bad idea when that is the only hub that they have in that area for internet, and there's not a lot of accessibility there.
Sorry,
Also,
if you could finish up your comments, the 2 minutes are up, and I just want to make sure.
I'm sorry. I apologize. I will cut it short for now, but I thank you for your time, and I'll continue to be participating in future meetings like this. Thank you for hosting it.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, the next person on the list is Eduardo Gonzalez.
Hi, good afternoon. Good evening. My name is Eduardo Orlalo Gonzalez. I'm a Daly City resident and also a staff at the Youth Leadership Institute. First of all, I want to thank the staff for making the effort to have this town hall to voice community needs and for the information that was provided. I think it's a very important public process that we cannot ignore, especially because we are talking about resources in Daly City. And I fully support what Nadia just shared earlier before me. I'm also here to share the importance of these funds going to youth development programs. It's no news that when I say that young people have identified that there are not a lot of things to do during the summer or throughout the year. Youth have shared that even volunteering requires you to pay a membership fee during the summer program sometimes. So we need more free programs for youth to be part of them developing their leadership and other transferable skills that can be recreational, educational, and hopefully even stipended work. So youth need and want to do these kinds of activities, especially over the summer. I also ask that these funds be used to continue supporting the services in Daly City that provide financial assistance for rent, groceries, transportation, as well as mental health resources to make sure that the community is taken care of and isn't being displaced. With more funding, that can mean more visibility for these services and hopefully more people taking advantage of those services. And lastly, hopefully these funds can also continue to be for COVID resources. We know that COVID is going to continue for a while. That can be more vaccination sites that are consistent in Daly City, for example. That way people don't have to travel across, and there is ways that community members can get vaccinated as soon as possible. Translation for materials, mailers that go out that talk about debunking the myths surrounding the vaccine. That way we can get to a community where we can all go back in person. Thank you all so much for your time and consideration.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Okay, hold on 1 second. Okay, the next person we have on the list is Phyllis Reezy. Phyllis, I saw your hand raised just a second ago. Oh, she might have fallen off. Oh, there you are, Phyllis.
Good evening, everyone. I want to first thank Shauna, as a wonderful city manager and her fantastic staff for everything they do for the community and how available they are to everyone who needs them at any given time. I did send an email to make a comment on Engine 99 and 95 that myself and my husband are thrilled that this was your priority and that we are very, very happy to see this reinstated, this very, very initial service for our city. Also, the thing I would like to see continued and considered is not only how we handle the pandemic and have grown every day from knowledge on how we can completely cover the problems that handle that, but also keeping some kind of a committee available for future emergencies for the city. I think we've learned a lot with the pandemic, much more than we ever expected we'd have to learn, both for residents and our wonderful city council who's handled it beautifully, and the learning process, and perhaps keep live that knowledge and future emergency services in that same direction. And I think really what we're doing is an age-friendly city, and honored to be on the task force. Is we've got some wonderful hot topics coming up, and the support of everyone who's working on it in the city government. I'm just so happy to be part of your group. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Okay. Next on the list is Bella Shelby, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Bea and I'm a high school student, and on behalf of Daly City for Black Lives, we urge council to never again increase the DCPD budget, especially with Measure Q funds. This includes any increases for tools like body cams, which do not create police accountability. Rather, body cams are used to surveil everyday people and prosecute people who look like me, while increasing the police budget and staffing. Moving forward, we continue to advocate that Measure Q funds go to the budget priorities listed in the community demand letter that we sent back in January 2021. Particularly when it comes to investing in behavioral health emergency responses, we can prevent what happened to Angelo Quinto from happening in Daly City. We urge council to use Measure Q funds towards funding a more robust and culturally responsive unarmed mental health response pilot program outside of DCPD. The current pilot program is sorely insufficient. We must shift the program from the police to unarmed first responders like firefighters or EMTs, and we must hire more than one clinician to cover an area of more than 100,000 residents. Also, 99% of people we surveyed said the police must not get funding from Measure Q. Funds should go towards needs like affordable housing, especially for the homeless, rent cancellations, libraries, youth programming, and mental health resources. At our forum, we reimagined public safety with 50-plus neighbors. I hope you read our written comment to see a list of what residents shared. Lastly, we are disappointed that council voted to allocate Measure Q funds before community input. We can support the fire department and also advocate for a transparent budget process that centers community engagement. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, the next person is Diodor Tronco.
Hello, my name is Jador Tronco. I think just to add on to what Bea was saying, I guess one thing I would say is MLK would say is injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So for example, since climate change is also a big topic, as many of us have experienced with all the wildfires early on in the year, though it was happening at another city, it was clearly affecting our city air as well. And so we should proceed with a similar framework. In addition, I also think in regards to the priority in terms of addressing COVID-19, like each priority should also include the prevention, vaccination, economic relief in terms of what was in the survey. I also believe the survey needs more context, especially to prevent juking of stats. There needs to be a portion of quantitative methods. So I think race and ethnicity, age, geographic location in regards to like what parts of Daly City is important. So like one person's experience from like top of the hill versus like someone's experience in Westlake can be completely different. Things should also include like employment status, the effectiveness, the efficiency, the quality, the equity. And I also think we should also utilize other data reports, such as from other entities, such as the folks that did the community collaboration for children's success. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, and I just want to pause for a second to remind the callers by phone that if you would like to speak, please press *9 to raise your hand. Okay, moving on to Delana Du. You'd like to unmute yourself?
Hello, good evening, City Council members and staff members and attendees. My name is Selena Doe, and I attend Westmore High School. I am a co-chair of Daly City Bay Leaders, and I'll be speaking today. I'm here on behalf to represent my group, and also talk about Measure Q and share some possible suggestions that you can all look into and possibly look and consider where to allocate the new funding of Measure Q. After some research, we all noticed that a majority of last year's budgeting mostly went to the police departments, along with the fire department. We understand your concern for safety of our community, but we are also hoping that you put more emphasis on the community safety and infrastructure as well. When we hear the word safety, we should also think about having safer sidewalks, better lighting, more visible / safer roads that include more bike lanes, and covering the random potholes throughout Daly City. Youth have always ridden bikes and relied on public transportation in order to get around, so the importance of having an improved infrastructure will make us all feel safer. And additionally, we would like more recreational opportunities for youth. For example, longer hours that the library remains open. For me personally, in the past, before the pandemic, I usually do not have a space to study and do my homework, because once I'm done with extracurriculars, the library is already closed. And also just having programs that address the littering in the community in another way, this can provide youth with educational and paid opportunities. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, next on the list is Joanna Rosales, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Good evening, council, staff, and my fellow Daly City neighbors. My name is Joanna, and I am a Daly City resident and also a member of Daly City for Black Lives. I ask that these funds go toward more effective mental health resources for the community, libraries, funding libraries, especially the Bayshore Library, and making sure it's open longer than 2 days a week, resources for formerly incarcerated folks, drug treatment centers, youth center programming, and COVID resources like targeted outreach and vaccination locations. I noticed on your council identified potential Measure Q initiatives that the expanding the vital community programming ranked number 5. I'm glad that it was up there still, but we need it to be higher. I think it should be number 1. Mental health services, library, recreation, youth, and adult programs are all long-term solutions in addressing the issues in our city, and not more money to the police department, which takes up over 40% of the budget, and not body cameras, which are a short-term fix. It's just a Band-Aid to a long-term issue. So thank you for having this forum tonight and for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Okay. Do any of the callers by phone want to say anything? If you'd like to just unmute yourself or you're having trouble raising your hand, just press *6. I'll just wait a little bit. Okay, I see someone unmuted themselves. If you'd like to make a comment, you can go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jay, and I want to call out the whiteness in the space and say it is an absolute privilege to say that, yes, trauma exists in BIPOC communities, but it doesn't exist here. So I don't feel heard when I hear that from some members of council. If social justice was a priority for council, I encourage you all to research and look into restorative justice. If this was a priority, then you wouldn't have police body cams in the same conversations as social justice. Not after there's been an example after example of Black, Brown, and Indigenous people murdered on cell phone videos, not even body cams, at the hands of the police, which is essentially the hands of the state. I wanted to be clear that I am in support of the fire department and would actually say that I personally feel more comfortable with them responding to mental health calls or other emergency-related calls, as they are trained in de-escalation, some being EMTs, and actually having rapport with the community. I appreciate and will hold Mayor Jocelyn to the suggestion of the mental health pilot being housed with fire. It's disappointing as a community member over the summer to try to put the pieces together about what Measure Q was, seeing the signs with the fire hats and just having a hard time reading that. It's just it was really inaccessible. And in our last forum on Friday, getting more context about what these are supposed to look like on the ballot, it helps, but it still doesn't take away the disappointment of not feeling heard and trying to flounder putting it together. So it just felt like I didn't understand what I was voting for on the ballot, especially after council didn't listen and voted unanimously just a week before this. So I could continue being frustrated with how this was carried out, but after a beautiful forum last Friday and hearing my fellow neighbors advocating for the Daly city that we want to see, it's amazing. And I really encourage you to open up more spaces for us to speak on these ideas in a timely manner and not after the vote. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Please just raise your hand and I will call your name. Okay, Mayor Manalo, it looks like we have gotten to everybody.
Thank you so much, Mr. Stolte. And first and foremost, I want to say thank you to every single person that has provided public comment this evening. For those of you that have turned in letters, thank you for this engagement and sharing with us your thoughts and your voice this evening. You know, your opportunities to weigh in on what is important to you do not end here. Our town hall tonight was focused on Measure Q, and it's the only new revenue source for Daly City at the moment to augment our budget. So we have heard you and will continue to consider your feedback as we start to form the next fiscal year budget. But your voice is so important because I value community engagement and input. We are here to listen. So in our decision making, we are able to respond and keep building and enhancing with community and programs. So for the next steps, for the overall budget process, I will hand it off to our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, and members of the public. This was I think, a successful event. I think it was well attended, and hopefully one of many attempts where the community feels like they are being heard. So I'm thankful for that. But as far as next steps in the budget process for this next fiscal year, for those of you that don't know how the fiscal year process works, it begins in July 1 in our budget. So July 1 of this year is actually considered fiscal year 22. And so we will be considering, or the council will be considering, a one-year budget. The city staff, we're still analyzing data on the economy and recovery from the recession and pandemic, as all cities are doing right now. So there's a lot of uncertainty still, which is why we're only going to be doing a one-year budget. Typically, we've done a 2-year budget. So as some of the council members suggested when they were speaking early on, this is covering a lot of big issues in a very small period of time. Nonetheless, the city will be advertising upcoming budget-focused public meetings. Those will likely take place in late April, early May, and you'll be able to continue to share your opinions on the services and programs that you think are most important. We want to hear from as many residents as possible, so please follow us on social media, sign up for our monthly e-newsletter, and visit our homepage for the latest information on upcoming events. And I'm just also glad that Channel 27, our public access channel, is working. That was a long haul. And maybe by the time we roll out this new budget for the council consideration, we will be in person. That would be ideal. So stay well, everybody. And that's all from staff's perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager Maltby. Once again, I can't emphasize thank you for being here, for every single person taking the time out. As mentioned by our city manager, there will be more opportunities to voice your opinion in upcoming budget hearings. So thank you for your time. Also, feel free to reach out to us. And we thank you, and we'll see you at our next meeting.